Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
I'm jazzed. Kaladesh is sweet.
Yes,
I think we should just talk about drumroll. Modern. We never talk about modern and Kaladesh. We just skip it every time. You know, like every other time Kaladesh has come out.
No. Let's get right into it because this is a set with all kinds of modern cards. And yeah, you're right. The last several times the Kaladesh came out,
we never actually skipped it. Instead, we said let's talk about Kaladesh vintage cards for 3 episodes. But I think this time Kaladesh is coming out. Let's focus on modern, at least for 1 episode.
Got it. How about we start? Do you have a particular place? Because I got one in mind that I'm kind of curious your thoughts on.
I mean, I can start. Mine is weird, though. We okay. Start with weird? Okay.
It's up to you. Mine's obvious.
All right. Mine is less obvious, but it's kind of weird. And I was thinking Cathartic Reunion. That's
good. That's not that weird.
Okay.
That's cool. That one's a easy win. So Cathartic Reunion, 1 in a red, sorcery, as an additional cost, discard 2 cards, and then you draw 3. And so the thing about this one is that because you're discarding the cards as an additional cost before you draw the 2 cards, or the 3 cards, you can actually just cast Cathartic Reunion, discard 2 cards with Dredge, or that have any kind of graveyard interactions you want, and then draw 3. And when you draw your first card, replace it with the Golgari Grave Troll. When you draw your second card, replace it with Stinkweed Imp. And when you draw your third card, hopefully your third card will be, you'll have in those 11 cards have revealed a third Dredger, so that you just get to mill yourself for 16 or 17 cards.
Yeah, so I just thought this card was, this is super powerful, right? Could you just
extremely powerful.
Start with the Dredgers in your hand, right?
Yes.
Discard the same one that you plan to pick back up. Yes, that's how it works?
Yep.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes, that's how it works. Not only is that how it works, you can actually pick up a Dredger revealed from the first Dredger's milling.
So how absurd is that? You could just upgrade, right? You could start by discarding a Golgari Thug and just immediately just pick up a Golgari Gravetroll that wasn't there a second ago.
Yeah.
And
the card is even card neutral because you're discarding 2 plus the Cathartic Reunion. You're still getting 3 cards. This is crazy. And you don't have to just discard Dredgers too. You can tactically use it for other reasons. You can discard a prized amalgam. On turn 1, you can actually just if you have Cathartic Reunion, you can go discard prized amalgam, discard a prized amalgam and a Bloodghast, and then play a land on turn 3 and get your Bloodghast back and your prized amalgam.
That seems real powerful to me.
And that's not even counting if you faithless looting some stuff, This is going to be this is definitely at the very least on the short list of best cards in Modern in the set, and it might not be the best. It depends on how the rest of the cards shape up, but this card is definitely going to be a very, very substantial Modern card. This is a big deal.
So when I said weird, I guess I was just completely wrong. Not weird. Obvious?
Well, I think this is one of the best. Yeah, this card is. This is a good card anyway. But this card, it does a lot of strange things. The fact that, here's a funny part, if your opponent spell snares your Cathartic Reunion, you're still stuck discarding the 2 cards.
Yeah, that's
which
bad
is pretty great. Well, if your cards are Golgari Grave Troll or Bloodghast or Haunted Dead or any of that stuff, Stinkweed Imp, you still get to discard your cards even if they counter it. Do you really care that much about drawing the cards? Of course you do,
sure,
because you would like to mill your cards. It's an Ancestral Recall. But you got to discard 2 cards. This card is going to be filthy.
So, it's not all upside, right? So the obvious comparison that Cathartic Reunion brings us up to would be Tormenting Voice, right? Tormenting Voice is kind of like the same card. You discard 1 fewer and then draw 1 fewer. So it's obviously a less powerful digging card, but also asks less of you. So the I think the downside of Cathartic Reunion, if there is a downside, is if you just rip it when you have no cards in hand, it just doesn't do anything for a while. And even if the same thing happens with like a Tormenting Voice, then at least you only have to wait one turn. But this you have to wait 2 turns probably in order to cast it, which that could be kind of a bad thing. On the other hand, the thing that's really cool about it is even if you're not playing with dredge cards, you can turn just like an extra land or an irrelevant removal spell, something in your hand that wasn't going to do anything, into potential action cards, which I think is really, really powerful given the scale of how many cards Cathartic Reunion can move.
Yeah, I mean, Cathartic Reunion it's riskier because if somebody counters it, you lose everything. But like if you just use it fair, straight up, it's better than Oath of Jace, right? Like Oath of Jace does basically the same thing. Now the Oath of Jace does it in a better order. And you get to keep the enchantment that gives you some scrying sometimes. But, like, I think in general, if nobody counters your spells, Cathartic Reunion is a more efficient card than even Oath of Jace.
Well, I mean, there's a mile in the 1 mana between 1 and 2. I'm sorry, between 2 and 3.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge difference. That's like, Dark Banishing versus, Doomblade.
Right.
And that's one thing. The other thing is like filtering, like transforming cards in your hand into new cards has become like I think a fairly rare ability. Like part of the reason that the creature Jacevin's Prodigy was so successful in Standard was because it had that ability. And look at how much people are willing to pay to get that ability in Standard. Like they're willing to pay Oath of Jace, which is kind of not. It's 3 mana. That's like a lot to ask for this ability.
For a compulsive research, but you never have the land buyout option?
Yeah. It's like, compare that card to like Thirst for Knowledge. And like Thirst for Knowledge obviously isn't a persistent permanent that lets you scry over time. But like there's just a leap between the filtering, looting type effect that has been present in formats in the past and what is generally printed right now. I mean, they'll let you draw bulk cards off the top of your deck more readily than they'll let you filter cards you've already got.
In addition to having a home in all sorts of dredge decks, I think Cathartic Reunion is an easy option to at least explore for the purposes of like some Goryo's Vengeance type of stuff.
Well, I was thinking any kind of reanimator type thing.
Life from the Loam also.
Oh man, this is just like a 1 card Life from the Loam engine machine.
Oh yeah,
you could like discard lands and draw into Life from the Loam at the same time.
And if you discard a Loam and one of those extra lands, you can actually dredge the Loam to have even more land in your graveyard for getting back with the next Loam.
This card it's a good one, I think.
And then finally, Cathartic Reunion might have some interesting applications in some of those funky, weird red Blood Moon decks. Like the types of decks that'll sometimes play Chalice of the Void and Simian Spirit Guide or Trinisphere, Blood Moon, any kind of like lockout stuff. Because Cathartic Reunion can actually let you put to use some of the lock components that aren't appropriate for this game state. Plus, those are the types of decks that sometimes they just have weird stuff that could combo, right? Like maybe you just have some Fiery Tempers because you happen to incidentally have 8 ways to discard that are good, or maybe you have some Phoenix, or maybe you have some graveyard interaction that's actually effective. And then actually, this is kind of just another Reanimator deck, but one other important use of Cathartic Reunion in a Reanimator capacity actually ties into the next card that I'd kind of like to hit from the set, which is the Madcap Experiment, which is 3 in a red sorcery. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an artifact card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Madcap Experiment deals damage to you equal to the number of cards revealed this way.
So pause on the Madcap Experiment for a second. I just want to close out Cathartic Reunion.
Sure.
So if you're going to play Cathartic Reunion in a Blue Moon deck or a Blood Moon deck of some kind, or I hate to say like a stacks deck, but that's kind of what you were describing to me. These kind of decks often have a variety of like weird answers that you just don't want a lot of the time, or like an errant Simian Spirit Guide that they don't need because it's no longer turn 2. So the ability to turn like a Lightning Bolt, which is a very commonly played card that you might not want depending on the matchup, to get to something that is like very relevant is very, I think, useful for these decks, especially when they're not blue, that are full of all kinds of precision answers, when those answers are in your hand but are in the wrong matchup.
Absolutely.
So, Madcap Experiment. It is a crazy experiment.
So, the big thing on Madcap Experiment in Modern is that there are some ways to get around this drawback, because obviously you're getting an incredible mana cheat. For 4 mana, you're getting a Tinker without even having to sacrifice an artifact. But instead of searching, you just have to take your top one. The drawback is, of course, you take a huge amount of damage depending on how deep the artifact was. Now, if you just so happen to set the top card, then you don't actually have to take any damage at all. You know, like it's
like from scrying or
yeah, I mean, you always
like
take
that.
at least 1 damage. But like, if you just knew, like for instance, if you cast some sort of a tutor that put the card on top of your deck, like if you congregated with Dawn, or you did any other kind of tutor where you actually just put the artifact, the creature, you know, if you just put the artifact on top of your deck, you know, like in Legacy, if you just Enlighten tutor, then you'd just take the 1 damage. But the thing that makes Madcap Experiment so, like, I'd like to just skip straight to the part that I think is the most powerful day 1 way to use Madcap Experiment in Modern, which is if the only artifacts in your deck are Platinum Imperiums. Platinum Imperium is 8 mana for an 8/8. Your life total can't change. So if the only artifacts in your deck are Platinum Imperiums, and I don't know if you want to have 2 or 3 or what, but if the only artifacts in your deck are Platinum Imperiums, if you Madcap Experiment, you'll always just hit a Platinum Imperium, you'll just put it in play, and it'll just be an 8/8, and you won't take any damage because Platinum Imperium says your life total can't change. So you don't even have to draw. It's not like a 2-card combo. If you just play with some Platinum Imperiums in your deck, which is a cost, because, I mean, it's an 8-mana card, right? But if you just have some Platinum Imperiums in your deck and don't play with any other artifacts, Madcap Experiment is just a 4-mana 8/8 that makes it so that your life total can't change.
So that's insane.
That is insane.
For a couple of reasons. Number one, let's say that that's just what your deck did, but, like, probably not. One thing that you can do with this is we've looked at certain kinds of decks in the past for Modern. For example, like Scred Red, or these decks that have Boros Reckoner and Koth of the Hammer, like fair mid-rangey red decks, or maybe even burn decks, sometimes that have access to cards like Simian Spirit Guide. You could just sideboard, just for sake of argument, you could just sideboard like 4 Madcap Experiments and 1 or 2 Platinum Imperiums in like any such deck, or even like a, you know, Nyaburn or Jund maybe even, right? Just have these cards in your sideboard, especially if you have some sort of mana accelerator. Cast Madcap Experiment as soon as you can, and you're proof against a ton of different kinds of combo decks, right? Right, this is like you're like, I don't know, Soltari
It's
Priest
your worship
or whatever. Like,
right, and it's a
card.
very fast kill. It's an 8/8. It's a very fast kill.
Oh, yeah, so they don't have much time to draw into their solution if they've got, like, an Echoing Truth or whatever. Like, they only have, you know, maximum 3-4 turns.
Yeah, and the fact that it's such a big, powerful weapon that doesn't require very much space in your deck, you could actually do, like, you could just put 4 Madcap Experiments and then like 2 or 3 Platinum Imperiums in your your blue-red control deck that has like Blood Moons and lots of counter spells and some cantrips and some card draw and just some interactions, some sweepers. You could just play like a totally normal deck. And then just you have this card that's a 4-mana, 8/8, your life total can't change.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you could be playing like just a Grixis control deck in one of these larger formats, and you just randomly had a couple of Splinter Twins for your, and a couple of Pestermites or something. Like back when you could play those cards, right?
Right.
But it wasn't a Splinter Twin deck. It was like a Grixis control deck, but like sometimes you combo them. Or you have access, from another route, like from sideboard or something. But I think this is incredibly powerful because there are so many different kinds of decks that have access to a single red, right? Just one red mana, which is all it's asking of you, where, like, these decks are highly vulnerable to certain kinds of combo decks, and, it's like adding another duress or something to your sideboard probably isn't really going to cut it.
And I'm not even just talking as a sideboard card because, like, if you just think about it, if you could just play with a card that was just a 4-mana, 8/8, your life total can't change, the card would be absurd.
That's pretty good.
The card would, like, revolutionize the format. And the only cost you pay in a deck building sense is you have to play with, like, 2 or 3 Platinum Imperiums, and then you also can't play with any other artifacts. And in exchange, think about what this does. If you're playing against Affinity, you just put this out, and now the only card in their they either have to assemble multiple Galvanic Blasts, or they have to try to win poison. It's so, like, almost all their cards are invalidated, and one of the sick things is that they can't even make progress in the meantime, because it isn't like Platinum Angel where as soon as the angel goes away you die. When Platinum Imperium is in play, your life total can't even change. So, like, they can't even, like, wear you down to 1 or 0 or whatever. Now, it is worth noting that when Platinum Imperium is in play, you can't sacrifice fetch lands, and you can't pay life as a cost for things like mutagenic growth or something.
Oh, you can't do it at all because
you can't do it because you aren't allowed to pay life since your life total can't change.
Oh, wow, that's different.
So that is a little bit of constraint, but that isn't like how you get the Imperium. It's just that once you have an Imperium in play, that's just always true. But I think that this is going to be a major, major card. I mean, this might be too good. This is definitely on the short list. I mean, at the very least, it's going to change the way that you play with cards. Like, for instance, suddenly Dismember is meaningfully worse than Path to Exile for some. You know what I mean?
I mean, I was just thinking about this for a second. I am so glad that we had the conversation an hour ago. We're like, hey, let's talk about Modern this week because I was just planning to sleeve up my Niaburn 75 for the RPTQ.
Oh, I don't recommend it.
I do not think that is a viable strategy anymore. Like, whether or not Niaburn is a viable strategy, my 75 is not a viable strategy.
Yes, that's fair.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like,
that I believe.
The very least, I have to have, like, extra Path to Exiles or, like, at least, like, a Threaten or something to steal their Platinum Empyrean so it's not for defending them. Something, right? Because this is insane. Or you have to beat them before their 4th turn.
I don't understand why you would play Niaburn when you can just play with this card. Dude, just play Madcap Experiment. Isn't that so sick?
That's powerful.
That's part of what I was getting at with the Cathartic Reunion, is that when you have Cathartic Reunion, and you can play with other cards instead, but, like, if you have Cathartic Reunion, one of the nice things is that if you draw one of your 3 Platinum Imperiums, you can, like, put it to use without having to get up to that kind of crazy amounts of mana. And alternatively, if you wanted, you could use, you could discard the card for some amount of actual Reanimator. But just the fact that Madcap Experiment lets you just, dude, I don't know. I just think it's also, you can just, like, let's say you're playing some, like, crazy Storm combo deck, or you're playing some Goryo's Vengeance deck. Like, if you're playing, like, a graveyard combo deck like Goryo's Vengeance, you could just sideboard in 4 Madcap Experiments and 2 Platinum Imperiums And suddenly you have a combo that doesn't use the graveyard at all, that just wins the game on a completely different axis.
It's weird to me to call it a combo, though, right? Because it's like a one-card combo.
It's the easiest combo in the world to set up.
So, I think you're right. I think this is too good. The only thing that's bad about it is it's garbage against Tom Ross. But, like, against...
It doesn't work against Infect. That's true.
So, but as long as they're not Tom Ross, you could fill your deck with Lightning Bolt and you're good against Tom Ross again. No problem.
I think this is going to completely revolutionize the format. I mean, Madcap Experiment is just disgusting. But there's so many other cards in this set that are playable in Modern. We should actually hit on some of the other ones as well, because Madcap Experiment is definitely a big pivotal one, but we sort of know the basic. Actually, I do want to, while we're on Madcap Experiment, though, briefly touch on some of the other combos that people have talked about, but I don't think that they're as compelling. To me, the Platinum Imperium one is just, because of the fact that it's a one-card combo that just wins the game against the majority of people. But there are some other combos. For instance, when you have Madcap Experiment in play, you can use your Barrington Forge Tender to, when Madcap Experiment is on the stack, to just ensure that you're protected. And if you have Madcap Experiment in play, you can actually, if you have, like, for instance, imagine you have, like, a Pariah. If you had a Pariah type effect and you put it on your Boros Reckoner, now you could just play 0 artifacts in your deck, so that your Madcap Experiment will just flip over like 48 cards or whatever. And then instead of you taking 48 damage, you redirect your 48 damage to your Boros Reckoner, which then does the 48 damage to your opponent. And there's a variety of different ways to get the Pariah experience, but basically the Madcap Experiment combos fall into basic 3 categories. 4 really. One is Platinum Imperium solves it by itself. One is that you have no artifacts and your plan is to kill yourself, except that you have some combo that either reverses the damage or redirects it to your opponent. Another way to combo is with things that prevent all the damage, like the Forge Tender. And then the final way is if you have a way to set the top card of your library, then you just ensure that the top card is the one you want so that you don't take that much damage.
Just do a regular thing.
Yeah. Platinum Imperium, though, is the one that to me just seems busted.
Well, I mean, like, in terms of its expected outcome, that's way better. I mean, what are you going to get when you're setting the top of your library? Or maybe not setting it, just that's better than my life total doesn't change. And by the way, I got, like you said earlier, I think it bears repeating. If you just got an 8/8 for 4, right? Imagine you didn't get your life total doesn't change. You just pay 4 mana for an 8/8. That's really good.
We can talk about that. That's like already on.
That's really good. So this is the best.
Isn't this just absurd? I don't understand why you wouldn't play this weekend in your Modern tournament.
I mean, you could play this in like a variety of different shells.
Yeah, you could literally play this it doesn't really work in Affinity, but you could play this in like a random just mid-range Naya deck. Like, what if you just have, like, you're just like, okay, I just am playing, or what if you're just playing a Loam deck, right? Like, your deck just generally has, you're just playing a Life from the Loam deck, and then you just happen to have a couple Platinum Imperiums and some Madcap Experiments. And then you're like, if I ever draw one of the Imperiums, I'll try to discard it to, like, Faithless Looting or Cathartic Reunion. But, like, I just have 4 mana 8/8s. Like, what if you're just playing your Grixis deck? And, like, you just have 3 Platinum Imperiums. And you just, sometimes you're like, okay, I guess sometimes I discard them to, like, Jace Friend's Prodigy or something. I don't know. But, like, a lot of the time I just have a 4 mana 8/8 that makes it so that my life total can't change. Like, imagine if you paved the way with, like, Duress or Inquisition of Kozilek or Thoughtseize early on. Now, you don't want to use Thoughtseize as much. Maybe you do. The thing about Thoughtseize,
cast it after you have the Empyrean. Right. But, like, even the combo decks that generate so much material, like, you think about those guys, like, they can have an overwhelming amount of advantage, like so they're not just dealing only 20 or like just barely eking out a win the way that some of the unfair decks go. Like if they don't have the right thing, like a Reclamation Sage or something in their deck, they're just completely incapable of winning, despite the fact that they can look at their entire library in one turn sometimes. Like that's the thing that's crazy about this.
Something to consider, by the way, if you play against Tom Ross, if you just have 2 Platinum Angels in your sideboard, you can take out your Platinum Imperiums and board in Platinum Angels, and then you actually just beat Tom Ross. And we're saying Tom Ross is code for infect, of course. But the reason I don't recommend starting with the Platinum Angel one is that your life total, you'll take tons of damage. So that, like, if you tutor up the Platinum Angel and you take, like, 25 damage, you'll just be at -5. The Platinum Angel will just keep you alive. However, you'll be at -5, so if anything happens to the Angel, you die immediately. Whereas if anything happens to the Platinum Imperium, you're actually no worse off because you didn't actually take any damage.
Yeah, all you did was got like, the world's greatest hunted Wumpus.
They can't even kill the Platinum Imperium in response to something to make it so that you take the damage. Like, they can't punish you. There's just no way.
Yeah, this is crazy good, Patrick.
Yeah, it's busted. It's like Treasure Cruise good. Potentially, right?
It's awesome. I'm just trying to think about what the best shell to play in. It's just like
it's a cross-format all-star. Because this card seems sick in Legacy.
Like the same way?
Yeah. Now, it's not as good, I don't think, in Legacy because there's so many other busted things.
There's so many sorts of plowshares in Legacy. That's it.
And Force of Wills. And it's annoying. You can't use your own Force of Will. And there's, like, artifacts that you'd actually want to play that it stops you from. But, like, Modern is the place where it seems the most busted. But, all right, so here's another card in the set that bears consideration for Modern. What do you think about Aetherflux Reservoir, which is 4 colorless for an artifact? Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn, and you can pay 50 life. Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player.
So are you envisioning this as like a storm finisher?
So the thing I've heard everybody talking about is that for a storm finisher, you can just go Aetherflux Reservoir, and then you cast spells, and you go gain 1, gain 2, gain 3, gain 4, gain 5, gain 6. That's not the way that has me excited, though. There's lots of things that you can already do, and I prefer to have the kill card at the end instead of the beginning. The one that has me that I'm interested in that I haven't really heard anybody talking about is Martyr of Sands with Aetherflux Reservoir.
So you can just like get 50 life or something, and then just have an Aetherflux Reservoir whenever you. Yeah,
I mean, you still put out the Aetherflux Reservoir. It's just that if you put out Aetherflux Reservoir and then just cast Martyr of Sands and sacrifice it, and then get it back and sacrifice it, they're probably dead. And if not, close, right? Like, you could potentially play with enough stuff like Sarah's Ascendant. Like, I think the Aetherflux Reservoir could be a part of some sort of Soul Sisters deck that isn't all in on the combo. Like some weird hybrid of Soul Sisters meets Martyr of Sands, where you can use like the Aetherflux Reservoir plays right into it, because you could just be like, every time you cast a spell, you gain a life for every spell you've cast this turn, and that just keeps triggering all your life gain matter stuff. You know, like you just get +1/+1 counters or whatever, right? And then your life total, it's relatively easy to get it up to 30 to make your Sarah's Ascendant, massive and awesome. But you also just, like with Martyr of Sands in a nearly mono-white deck, if not mono-white, probably mono-white, you're going to be like relatively easily gaining enough life that you can actually just
get to 50.
Get to 50 really fast, where you're like killing people on turn 5 when you just have, like if you just go turn 1 Martyr of Sands and then sack it, you might kill him on turn 5 just from having so much life.
I mean, you could just play a weird deck that has like all this incidental life gain, right? Like that these cards are like pretty good, but then you just lace them all together because you have such a big payoff at the end. Like imagine like cards that people play, like Lightning Helix, Kitchen Finks, maybe even War Leader's Helix, which is just not a card that you think of as being a a modern staple. But you just put all those cards in your deck together. If you have a card that's basically like 4 mana, win the game big. Maybe those cards all suddenly get to be in the same deck. Further, there are a fair amount of ways to easily get to a huge life total that doesn't immediately win the game, right? Like if you have Malira combined with the Sacrifice Outlet and Kitchen Finks, right? You can just easily get to a huge life total, but that doesn't mean that you've necessarily won. Typically you have to do something else alongside. But this gives you a payoff.
Well, and it also gives you a payoff for if you can just loop some sort of spell-like effect, right? Like, because there's certain things that bounce themselves. I mean, if you have a Cloudstone Curio type of situation, for instance, it's possible that you might incidentally set up some sort of a loop that way. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is yet, but I think that it's pretty exciting the prospect of finding a way to use Aetherflux Reservoir as a quick combo kill. And actually, another card from this set that I think is going to be a modern, like at least consideration is well, first of all, obviously Smuggler's Copter.
I knew you were going to go to Smuggler's
But that's
Copter.
not the one I wanted to touch on. But it's going to come up in the course of discussing Metalwork Colossus.
So Metalwork Colossus is an 11 casting cost artifact creature construct. He's 10/10 for 11, and when Metalwork Colossus costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of non-creature artifacts you control. Sacrifice 2 artifacts, return Metalwork Colossus from your graveyard to your hand. So if you've got like a bunch of stuff in play that are non-creature artifacts, then Metalwork Colossus can be potentially cheap. Do you think this can go in Affinity? Or do you think all the artifacts are creatures there?
Yeah, too many of there are creatures, or they cost 0. They cost 0 or 1. So it's actually just not very good in a traditional like Affinity setup.
But it could be good in like I don't know, like an Ironwork setup, like something that has a bunch of artifact mana.
So it could potentially work really well in anything that's set up like the Second Sunrise style of decks. Because
if you just got like a bunch of eggs in play and then cast Metalwork Colossus.
Yeah, and get like if you have some way to get them back, and there's a variety of things that could interact with, and I don't know if it'll end up being right, but like it does key off the Smuggler's Copter, it does key off of Cranial Plating. But the big thing you want to look for is some way to cheat an artifact, like to play. Like you'd want this to go in some sort of a deck that just incidentally gets artifacts in play that don't do anything, or that do things for other reasons, like while they're in play. I generally, though, I'm always interested when I see this big of numbers, like a 10/10, that you can just potentially play for like 0 mana or 1 mana. Like realistically. You could, if you just have like the right artifacts in play, you might just be able to just play a deck that just plays Metalwork Colossus on turn 3 as just a 10/10.
Do you think there could be like a Tesserator?
Maybe. That's not a bad home.
There hasn't been a Tesserator in some time, but I think like if you just have a reason to have a bunch of rando cheap artifact acceleration in your deck because you're getting paid off from Tesseract anyway, then like you could just, I'm just going to spitball this. Let's say you have like 2 signets or whatever the equivalent of a signet is in play, right? Like that's already going to discount Metalwork Colossus by 4, correct? So if you've got 2 signets, they themselves tap for mana.
Well, so if you're going to, instead of doing the signet plan, once you're going that route, the place I think is actually the most exciting is if you're using a bunch of the border posts. Because the border posts say they cost 3, but they technically only cost 1 if you're playing them like your lands, and they don't use up very many slots in your deck. Because now each of it's like Affinity's Darksteel Citadels, except you can play tons of them, and each one reduces the cost of a Colossus by 3. So if you just play a border post on turn 1 and a border post on turn 2, suddenly you're at a spot where a third border post on 3 means the Colossus is just a 2 mana 10/10. And you even have the ability to rebuy him later. Like, I don't think you have to be all like, and you could actually just play like a restore balance deck that happens to be able to just play 2-mana 10/10s like every game on turn 3.
Well, that's actually something the restore balance deck might want to do, because
Absolutely.
they're so volatile on their draws.
Right, like it's nice that you already have these the ability to like cascade into restore balance to like kill creatures and destroy some lands, but it's really kind of nice to have the ability to actually close the game out. And Metalwork Colossus is so much better than trying to win with like a Johnny Vengeance or something.
I mean,
like it kills so
Totem.
fast. Yeah, but the fact that Metalwork Colossus kills so fast, plays with all the artifacts that they want to be playing with anyway, and then it also just gives them a way to really punish. Like, if you restore balance and destroy somebody's lands so that they're just mana screwed for a couple turns, Metalwork Colossus kills in 2, man. You don't have to wait very long.
Yeah, I mean, like, this guy just messes you up.
So I think Metalwork Colossus is going to have... The key to optimizing for this guy is going to be figuring out what are the artifacts that you can use that have the most cost that you're not actually paying. And I think that the border posts are an early favorite.
Border posts
I think
are so volatile. That's the thing. Like,
that's why you need the like restore balance thing, so you're getting more payoff for actually going to the trouble.
Like, you have these hands, because typically you're swapping out some number of regular lands to play border posts, and then you just hope you have like a basic to catalyze any of the border posts that you've got, and that works. Except when like you would have otherwise kept like a 2 or 3 land hand, but the 2 or 3 lands are all border posts. That's like,
Now it's worth noting that that if you play with the Cascade stuff, you can't play 2-cost artifact accelerators. But if for whatever reason you actually just wanted to, like if you found enough reason to want to go a different direction, like there's a different path you could do where you play a Mind Stone or something on turn. Like if you go Border Post on 1 and then Mind Stone on 2, you can still play your Border Post on 2 and just have the Metalwork Colossus already ready with just 2 Border Posts and 1 Mind Stone. I would be surprised if that's better than Restore Balance. But
well, I mean, it could certainly be a potential line with Tesserator, though. That's the thing. Like, those kind of cards will perfectly go into Tesserator, and you've got other things you can do now.
Yeah, if your deck just has, like, some Mind Stones, if you have, like, 8, like, Dimir Signet, Mind Stone, Talisman of Dominance type stuff, and then, like, 8 blue border posts, or maybe 12 because you're playing the black red one even. I don't know. If you just have like tons of border posts and 2-mana accelerators, then you're already well on your way. Plus, you might just have other stuff that you're in the market for. You know, just random 1s and 3s and stuff from your Tesserator deck.
And I mean, Tesserator would be fine just like being friends with Metalwork Colossus anyway. Like they could be buddies.
Yep. So Smuggler's Copter, though, I wanted to get on because Smuggler's Copter could be used in some sort of a weird Metalwork Colossus deck if you just literally had enough ways to both crew the Smuggler's Copter and also non-creatures for powering up the Colossus. But the Smuggler's Copter in Modern has a variety of ways it could be used. To begin with, there are more like there's Madness cards, right, to be sure, but there's also lots of just graveyard interactions. Like when you have Smuggler's Copter, you can now just tap your creatures at will. So what's interesting is that if you have some sort of an untap mechanic from like Eventide, you could set up a loop where Smuggler's Copter lets you just crew it over and over and over and over and over and over again. You know, like if you have something that has an untap ability,
like a Pilly,
like or like Devoted Druid or something. You know, like I don't know.
Devoted Druid, that's a good man.
You know, now you have to keep the Devoted Druid alive, but actually, Devoted Druid, I guess, has his own way of untapping. But like, if you just have if you have something that can just untap itself that isn't necessarily just tapping, so maybe it's the Pilly Poly. Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know if there actually is a combo in this space, but it's just something to keep in mind. But the big thing with Smuggler's Copter is the fact that it's just so unbelievably efficient. When you're playing your affinity deck, you can just put down you can just play Smuggler's Copter in your deck. It's just like such an insane good card. And Affinity is a deck that has some awful, like it has cards that are great in your opening hand that really, really fall off. And it's really nice to be able to pitch like an extra Mox Opal or something, right? Like just pitch an extra Mox Opal to loot and draw something good. And it's not like you lost anything. I mean, you could just power up one of your Blink Moth Nexus and use it to crew the Copter. Or you can just drop a Memnite and crew the Copter with that. And it's nice that it's it's a creature threat that dodges sweepers. So if people are playing things like Slagstorm, Firespout, Damnation, whatever, Smuggler's Copter sits in play not being a creature until you want it to be. And so, like, if you just have a Blink Moth Nexus and a Smuggler's Copter, you can, like, hide a Copter and its crew where the sweepers can't get it.
Yep.
And, flying's good anyway, and generally just think that there's going to be some sweet, sweet interactions there. But there's actually, like, lots of other cards in this set, too, that are like, at least worth considering for Modern. What do you think about, this is kind of a crazy one. And I don't know if this one's going to be good enough, but this is a little crazy. What do you think of Dubious Challenge in Modern? This is 3 and a green, sorcery. Look at the top 10 cards of your library. Exile up to 2 creature cards from among them, then shuffle your library. Target opponent may choose one of the exiled cards and put it into the battlefield under his or her control, but the rest under the battlefield under your control.
I've thought about this card a lot, and I think I would be dubious on this challenge.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, first of all, it's just way worse than Madcap Experiment for the same thing, right? For cheating a guy. So the combo with Dubious Challenge is that if you spend 4 mana and then you have a bounce card, you can actually just load your deck up with some fatties that are that don't have comes into play abilities or draw cards or defensive abilities, and then you can just Dubious Challenge and whichever one your opponent keeps, you bounce. The problem is, what is the awesome fatty that doesn't have a defensive ability or comes into play ability? Like, what is it that you're really what are you hoping to get?
The reason that I like this less is that there are already a bunch of green abilities that aren't even that popular in Modern that do similar things for like a what's the one that's free if they counter a spell? Summoner's Pact. Sorry, it's like GG4, I think, instant. But if they counter a spell, it's free.
Yep. Like
there's that thing, which is like 2 more mana than this, but an instant and sometimes free, and you don't have a downside to it. And it looks at fewer cards, but like that seems like a more consistent route to me. Yeah, and that's not even like a hella popular strategy in Modern, right? It's like only like pretty popular. What's the name of it? I'm kidding. Shooting.
Summoning Trap.
Summoning Trap, right? Like you could use that card to catalyze like a Kiki combo, or at least to get a Primeval Titan in play.
You think about in Modern Chandra, Tortured Defiance.
That was actually after the Cathartic reunion. That was just like my next one. If you think about the history of forecasting cost Chandras in Modern, we've seen them just see play in like Jund and decks like that. It's just like, oh, this is a card that is like could be good enough. This Chandra is miles better than any 4-mana Chandra we've ever seen before. So my assumption is, in the same kind of decks that we're seeing, a need for previous Chandras, we could just easily see 1, 2, maybe even 4 copies in a Modern Jund deck or other mid-range decks that are looking to eke out advantages over the course of many turns and or compact, I should say, like. A bunch of value into each individual card.
I mean, people have played stuff like Huntmaster the Fells, Olivia Voldaren, because they're just desperate. For Gearhulk Relentless, anything. They're just desperate for a 4-drop. Chandra's so much better than any of those cards. So much better.
Well, I mean,
and she plays into the strategy of Jund perfect.
Do you think she takes the place of Koth in the decks that want to play Koth?
I have no idea what these decks are that want to play Koth.
Well,
so I guess
they have a lot of mountains, and I guess
if there are such decks, I mean, maybe you could just play both. I don't know enough about.
I mean, I could easily see myself. I mean, maybe not myself, but I could see someone playing like a Koth, untapping, and then casting a Platinum Empyrean with the Koth. Right? That's like a super reasonable thing to do if you're the kind of guy who's going to cast forecasting cost red spells anyway, and might have a Koth in your deck.
Yeah, I mean, I think Koth's a fine card. I'm just saying I'm not familiar with that deck. I think that if your deck is already set up for Koth, Chandra, she just goes in decks that cost 4. I mean, she seems amazing.
Well, she's only a little less good than Koth at making mana, right? But,
I mean, she ticks up when she does it in a way that is, like, pretty great. Like, for, like, the purposes of... I mean, with her, she's actually less restrictive, too. You don't have to just play all mountains.
Yep.
But the thing I like about Chandra in decks besides just Jund, or the place I should say, because in Jund, I love that every part of the Buffalo type experience. She does all sorts of things you want. You already had... Like, you love removal, you love drawing some extra cards in your non-blue deck, you love the extra mana because Jund can put it to use, like powering up a Raging Ravine or whatever. But, like, she also can be, I think she can be played in, like, Primeval Titan Valakut decks. Because, like, if you just put out like, you just turn 2, play, like, some sort of accelerator, whether it's a turn 1 Search for Tomorrow or a turn 2 ramp spell, so that on turn 3 you drop Chandra. If you can untap with her, you're a Primeval Titan already.
Yep.
And it's nice that she's also a legit threat, and she can help remove things like Leonin Arbiter or Aven Mind Sensor or whatever. Having more answers to, like, troublesome creatures with a card that's also drawing you cards that can also just win the game on its own. And it's cute that the 2 damage from Chandra is, like, a very real amount in a deck that might use Scape Shift.
Oh.
Because, like, they often will do 18 damage on turn 7 and have to wait a turn for the last points.
And that could be the difference between winning and losing.
Oh, yeah, a full turn in Modern? Definitely.
Do you think that Chandra's ever going to get along with, like, Snapcaster Mage?
I do. I actually think Chandra for sure is I'm already ready to play Chandra in some Grixis decks. See, I think the key to Chandra, like, those decks, the type of deck that would use Pia and Kiran Noir that has, like, Inquisition of Kozilek to help clear the path?
Sure.
Chandra is ready for that. She wants that.
You think that she's just better than Mom and Dad at that 4 spot?
Yeah, the fact that that she doesn't work well with counterspells, that's true. Like, she isn't the greatest with counterspells, but you don't need a lot of counterspells in a Grixis deck.
She's not bad at counterspells, right? She's not like previous Chandras. You just nug them if she reveals a counterspell.
Yeah, it's not the best in the world. It's just that sometimes it's nice to have the card draw spell work with. But, like, she works great with, like, Inquisition of Kozilek, Duress, Thoughtseize. Additionally, if you flip a Cryptic command, you can still just do 2 modes.
Yeah,
and that's to say nothing of the fact that sometimes you just have some cards that are, like, if you would have flipped a land, you would have just done 2 to their face anyway. So the counterspells are just, like, more land bricks, But, like, a Grixis deck could definitely get into Chandra. And a Grixis deck definitely has ways to put that mana to use. I'm thinking the sort of deck that Snapcaster Mages, Culligan's Command. Plus, I don't know. I'm not saying that you want to do this, but the thought has occurred to me that you might play with Torrential Gearhusk.
Yeah, I was thinking about,
Gearhulk,
Gearhulk, sure. I think multiple Gearhulks are a potential modern playable. Right? Like, we've already used the words Congregation at Dawn, I think, in this podcast. If you're going to do that, Combustible Gearhulk it starts looking like a reasonable card to play.
Disagree entirely. Do they make you draw 3 cards? you could have just killed your opponent with a combo in Modern. I like where your head's at, but man, you got to dream bigger.
All right, Madcap Experiment it is. I just there's nothing that we're going to talk about that's more exciting than 4 mana. If it's just 4 mana, I get an 8/8. That's already better than.
Yeah.
I played Hunted Wumpus in an extended Pro Tour, and I made day 2.
Good for you, man. Sick brags, though.
Yeah, I'm just saying, right? Like, Hunted Wumpus is 4 mana for a 6/6 with a horrendous drawback. Like, it's real bad. Survival of the Fittest was legal in that Pro Tour. Did you ever try casting Hunted Wumpus when the opponent has Survival of the Fittest in play?
I played Survival in that Pro Tour, and I beat somebody who cast Hunted Wumpus.
No,
so.
you didn't. You played Necropotence.
Oh, I also beat I played somebody that played Hunted Wumpus. Maybe it wasn't that Pro Tour, but I played Survival at a different Pro Tour and beat Hunted Wumpus.
Yeah, it's not good. But for 4
Necropotence sounds great, man.
It was
Dude, Torrential Gearhulk, though. This one cheats the casting cost, too. See, in Standard, there aren't really, like, super expensive instants. But if you have Torrential Gearhulk, you can actually use it as sort of a reanimator spell for instants. Because if you just discard, if you could discard using, like, Cathartic Reunion or Faithless Looting or Jace or anything else.
Anything, yeah. I mean, once you're talking about Modern, you have, like, a reasonable ability to use cards like Thirst for Knowledge or Compulsive Research or, maybe not. People compulsive research, I guess. But, like, you can cast those cards.
Yeah, and if you potentially have some way to like Torrential Gearhulk flashing back the Thirst for Knowledge as part of the backup plan, it's, like, not the worst.
That's pretty good, actually. What if you, like, net card advantage off of a Thirst for Knowledge getting a Torrential Gearhulk? Oh, wait, no, that's the opposite of how... You could still do that. You could still do that,
But you can also just Thirst for Knowledge away your Gearhulk and then get it back into play. Reanimate it somehow.
And then get back to Thirst for Knowledge.
The big thing I'm trying to figure out is if they're... Like, what's the best instant to flash back and cheat the cost of? So, like, in Modern, the biggest effect that you can do is either Lava Ball Trap or Searing Wind. Searing Wind is just 9 mana for instant deal 10 to a creature or player. And then Lava Ball Trap is 6 red for destroy 2 target lands and deal 4 damage to each creature. So it's like, if you just Lava Ball Trap, your Torrential Gearhulk doesn't die. You kill 2 of their lands, and if you're doing this early on... But the nice thing about the Lava Ball Trap is that if your opponent ever fetches... You can just, like, Lava Ball Trap them by paying 5 instead of 8 and just get them. Get them good.
What about the one that's, like, I think it's UU3. If they ever search their library, you mill them for 10. Like...
13.
Oh, for 13, sorry. Like, that one seems okay. Like, a lot of people search their libraries. Like, almost everyone actually searches their libraries. And then just getting that card back... I don't know. Maybe, do you think that's going to be lethal? I mean, a lot of people are also self-milling. So, I'm not sure if that means that it's good or bad for you. If people are self-milling.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sometimes good, sometimes horrible.
What do you think about the other Gearhulks, though? Like, do you think that is there any chance that you would play Cataclysmic Gearhulk?
I mean, I had Cataclysmic Gearhulk near the top of my list of modern playable Gearhulks. I mean, but I had Combustible Gearhulk really high on that list, and you super disagreed with it. Like, I just can't see myself playing Verdurous Gearhulk in modern, or Noxious Gearhulk. Those effects just come more cheaply, or you don't want them at all in modern. Cataclysmic Gearhulk, it has a pretty unique effect for a creature.
Right.
So we
do have
playable.
Yeah, I think it's fringe. There's some people who play there's these decks that pop up that are like the white heavy like control decks, the type of deck that would use like a Magus of the Tabernacle. Those type of decks sometimes might be in the market for like a Cataclysmic Gearhulk. the thing that's potentially interesting with Cataclysmic Gearhulk, one other thing that's potentially interesting is if you have some way to convert all the permanents in play into artifacts, or if you have some way to convert every card so that every card, like if you can just make like all your opponent's lands count as creatures, or all your opponent's land count as artifacts, or all your opponent's land count as enchantments, whatever it is, Cataclysmic Gearhulk starts to do some pretty cool stuff.
You can just get them for a bunch of permanents.
Right, exactly. So one of the coolest, one of the most exciting modern cards for the set, I think, is Saheeli Rai, which is 1 blue-red for a Planeswalker 3 loyalty, +1 to scry 1. Saheeli Rai deals 1 damage to each opponent. It has -2. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. That token gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. And then it has -7. Search your library for up to 3 artifact cards with different names, put them out on the battlefield, and shuffle your library. So there's a variety of ways you can use this. Some fair, some combo. But the most attractive day 1 combo to me is with liquid metal coating. If you have liquid metal coating and Saheeli Rai, you can actually just copy you can use liquid metal coating to turn Saheeli Rai into an artifact that still has all its same abilities. Saheeli Rai can target itself if it's an artifact. Now, of course, the Planeswalker uniqueness rule happens, so Saheeli Rai will die, and you lose the old one. I mean, you lose the new, like you'll lose the old one, but the new one is an artifact according to Saheeli Rai's ability. So, like, you can actually just keep making copies of Saheeli Rai over and over and over and over
just
again.
Like infinite someone with some sort of thing that's based
if you have a trigger, like every artifact you play, you do damage or gain life or whatever, then you can actually just go off and kill your opponent on turn 3 when you play Saheeli Rai.
Oh,
and there's actually a little bit of redundancy. Like you can actually have in addition to just the liquid metal coating combo, you can actually play with what are some of the other ones? There's so Leonin Relic Warder is another good one. If you have Leonin Relic Warder and Saheeli Rai, you can make a copy of your Leonin Relic Warder, and then your copy of the Relic Warder can blink out the other. You can just keep blinking Leonin Relic Warders over and over and over and over again.
Well, you could also just have like an Aetherworks Marvel, right? If you have an Aetherworks Marvel, every time a permanent you control is put in the grave. Oh, does that work for tokens? You get an energy.
The permanents, they as long as it says permanent, then they go to the graveyard. They're not cards, though. So Phyrexian Metamorph is another one. If you have Phyrexian Metamorph, you can actually just your Leonin Relic Warder and your Phyrexian Metamorph your Leonin Relic Warder. You don't even need Saheeli Rai for this one. You can actually just have your Leonin Relic Warder. You can have a Phyrexian Metamorph make a copy of a Leonin Relic Warder, and it's an artifact, so it just blinks.
What if we just played with Ancient?
Altar of Brood is the easiest one. So Altar of Brood for just 1 mana is the kill card if you're just looping any of this stuff.
What about if you just had Ancient Grudge in your deck, right? Like you're playing with liquid metal coating. Like, doesn't Ancient Grudge just become the best card ever? Right? You could just turn any of your opponent's permanents into artifacts and then just like always have 2-for-1s ready.
You could.
I think I would probably just play them in the same deck.
Your Leonin Relic Warder is already doing some of that combo too. Because like when you have liquid metal coating, you can just liquid metal coating your opponent's land and then just Relic Warder them.
That's hot.
And then just Phyrexian Metamorph your Leonin Relic Warder next turn.
I think that the Saheeli Rai combo is awesome because it's faster potentially than the Tinker combo.
It is a turn 3 combo that can actually just win.
And it can beat the Tinker combo, right?
Yep. It wins through it. And that's to say nothing of just straight up relic ordering their Platinum Imperium.
Oh, well, there's like all different ways, right? Like if you, like you had Ancient Guards, like I said, you just actually have a main deck way to destroy a permanent, an artifact, which is unusual, for some people to be able to penetrate 8 toughness or have a main deck way to destroy an artifact. So there's lots of cool stuff there. Actually, that's insane. Liquid Metal Coating Saheeli Rai. You just 1, 2, 3 them, right, with the altar?
Yeah, so if you just go turn 1 Altar of the Brood, turn 2 Liquid Metal Coating, turn 3 Saheeli Rai, you just use Liquid Metal Coating, make Saheeli Rai an artifact, and then you can just copy over and over and over and over again, and it puts infinite permanents onto the battlefield for the purposes of Altar of the Brood, and then your opponent's just one-shotted. Isn't that crazy? Like, just one big hit? And the fact that you also have all this redundancy, where, like, Leonin Relic Order with Phyrexian Metamorph is also just a loop that also kills with stuff like if you have anything that triggers off of seeing stuff coming into play, like Altar of the Brood. So
I'm going to blow your mind.
Yep.
When we were talking earlier about, like, Metalwork Colossus Tesserator, you could play these in the same deck, right? Like, let's say you just wanted to complete your Saheeli Rai combo. Couldn't Tezzeret help you do that? That's just like a thing he does.
Yeah, you could do that if you wanted.
I think I thought at the beginning of this podcast, 2 cards in, that we were not going to find something more exciting than the Tinker combo. I was incorrect. I think this is more exciting.
This one might be more exciting. It might even prove better, but the Tinker combo is so good. I think that
go anywhere. That's what's so good about it.
Yeah, it's the fact that it's not necessarily the best deck, but I bet it will be. I would not be surprised if it's too good, but it's also just so obvious that people are going to work with it. The Saheeli Rai is definitely fancy and unlikely to be quote-unquote too good. However, it might be. I mean, it is a turn 3 combo deck. It's unreal fast. It's way faster.
And it kills through the things that people have defense for, right? Like, it kills through infinite life. It kills through, Platinum Empyrean. It's And
your backup plan involves a great deal of interaction. Like the fact that you can use Liquid Metal Coating with, like, Relic Order, or you can use Saheeli Rai with, Saheeli Rai has Scry anyway, but you can also just use Saheeli Rai for value.
Oh, yeah, it's just still, like, it's just a planeswalker you can use to advance yourself. And it's probably low cost for you to just have 3 awesome artifacts in your deck that you can assemble to kill somebody with. What? Let me think for a second. If you've got Saheeli Rai already, I guess you'd need to have an additional Saheeli Rai to actually use that as a lethal, right? Like, you can search for, like, up to 3 artifacts, and one of them can be the altar, one of them can be a Liquid Metal Coating, right? But then you actually need another Saheeli Rai.
Yeah, but there might also just be an artifact that is worth playing that could help you get it back, because, like, at the very least, maybe you just have one of that artifact that costs 1 mana that you tap to mill, and then you can pay 5, tap it, and 5 and sacrifice it to get a card back from your graveyard.
Prixis? Is that the name of it? Prixis of Pandemonium?
No. That's the one that saves up all the creatures. But anyway, there's still more. Like, speaking of tutoring, what do you think of Inventor's Fair?
Oh, Inventor's Fair? The land?
Yeah.
I think that it's a low-cost thing that you can... It's always okay, right? And sometimes it's really, really powerful, right? So at the beginning, Adventurous Fair is a legendary land. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. So that doesn't do anything by itself, but it has this amazing second line. And the second line is tap to add
This is in addition to tapping for colorless.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one.
That's the line. Tap to add colors. I'm like, oh, wait. All of a sudden, this card is just... The horizons have opened up because... At least in the past, you could have these lands that have, like, really interesting abilities, but they don't tap for mana. But this one just comes into play untapped, taps for mana, and then now it has this amazing ability, right? Like, all of a sudden, just the first ability, I'm really interested, right? Like, oh, this this just does this for nothing. But wait, there's more. And I think this is
the last line, the last ability is definitely what gets me in the door.
4-tap, sacrifice Inventor's Fair, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. Among other things, if you have multiple copies of Inventor's Fair in your deck, you can get rid of one this way because they're legendary. You can play your next one. But, tutoring is really, really powerful. And this is a tutor that has, no cost because the Inventor's Fair is just a good card a reasonably good card by itself.
I think the thing that excites me with Inventor's Fair is the prospect of having one of my lands in Affinity become, you'd be able to cash it in and just go find cranial plating.
Yeah. Cranial plating was also where I was thinking if you're playing in Affinity. But if we're playing it at one of these fancier decks, like a Saheeli Rai deck, for example, it can just always kind of complete the cycle for you.
Right, you might just have enough artifacts in your deck because you might just have, Altar of Brew, Liquid Metal Coating, maybe some artifact mana. I'm not sure that I wouldn't be. I would guess that Inventor's Fair probably would mean that you're playing a blue-red deck instead of you're moving away from the Relic Warder, Phyrexian Metamorph style. Just because I think that it's too hard to play these colorless lands if you're playing Relic Warder, but maybe not. I'm not sure. But Inventor's Fair is definitely also worth considering with Aether Vial. One of the cool things with Aether Vial is that it's one of the artifacts towards your 3 for Inventor's Fair, but it also is it's a way so that when you tutor, you can just cast the card you tutored for. So even if you use all your mana, you can just instantly play whatever artifact creature you went and got. If it's an Arcbound Ravager or if you've got something else,
What do you think about Sequestered Stash? So this is a card that's kind of similar, right? It doesn't have the life gain ability, but it taps for colorless, but it has 4-tap, sacrifice Sequestered Stash. Put the top 5 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may put an artifact card from your graveyard on top of your library. Among other things, if you run out of Platinum Empyreans, this can get a Platinum Empyrean back.
Yeah, this one, I like this card for Standard. I think this is a very modest haven of the Spirit Dragon of sorts.
Yep.
The thing is, I don't love it in Modern for a couple reasons. To begin with, you don't get the card in your hand, you get it on top of your deck. That's already a big thing. The second is that Inventor's Fair only gets Inventor's Fair can get anything you want in this position. Demonic Tutor is better than Regrowth. And certainly Demonic Tutor is better than Reclaim.
Yeah,
right.
For the same cost.
And then finally, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, gain a life, is actually a very relevant and good ability. Burn is quite good. And having just if you just put down Inventor's Fair and Affinity, you will easily gain 3 to 7 life. You just love having this in play. It's so... this card could be just game-winning if you just have this in your opening hand in an Affinity deck against Burn. So I like Inventor's Fair quite a bit better.
But you don't think Sequestered Stash maybe has any relevance in...
I would be surprised. Academy Ruins is just so much better in every way, just about.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about Academy Ruins, despite the fact that I loved that card once upon a time.
Yeah, I think Sequestered Stash is just it's not a legendary land and it doesn't require blue mana. So I think that there's definitely an argument to be made that maybe you just want a Sequestered Stash in your Thopter Sword, Ensnaring Bridge, the weird Lantern deck. If you have some sort of a Lantern deck, it might just be crucial that you draw some sort of Academy Ruins thing, but it might just be better to play 1 Sequestered Stash instead of a 3rd Academy Ruins. But it's a pretty niche scenario for you to. I think Academy Ruins is just so much more powerful of a Magic card.
What about in a Loam deck? You can catalyze your Loam by putting a card into your graveyard, and in fact put multiple cards into your graveyard. It doesn't have any effect on your card advantage because. It's not like the artifact was going to your hand, like you said before, so I don't know. Get 5 cards into your graveyard for...
I just think that a Loam deck can do That sounds really bad. I think that a lone deck just has so much better ways to spend its mana.
Any fetch land?
Yeah, or its land drops. I just don't think that's the way.
Yeah, I agree. That was a test. You passed.
Oh, goody. So another card for Modern, if I could. What do you think about the Wildest Dreams? XX green. Return X target cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Wildest Dreams.
I mean, like, I think you're the one who taught me this this card evaluation strategy, which is like, would I ever want to do this? And that's like the first question. And the answer is obviously yes. And the second question is, would I do this for this cost? And I think that in this case, I would, right? If you're only going to return one card, it costs you 3, right? Which is on the order of an Eternal Witness. But
you're not getting a 2/1. I mean, I wouldn't play Regrowth in Modern.
You're not getting a 2/1, right? But I mean, this is just the bottom, okay? If you're going to get 2 cards, it costs 5, right? I'm like, that's kind of expensive to draw 2. If you're going to get 3 cards, it costs 7. I think that this card could see play if you have some kind of deck that's generating a massive amount of mana with non-renewable sources, and then you can maybe get those back, maybe to Storm. But this isn't a natural color for Storm.
So I think that Recollect has already shown up in Modern from time to time. There are combo decks that will sometimes just want one regrowth effect. Whether it's for a gift package or whether it's for just having some redundancy because they'd rather have a Recollect instead of a second kill card. And I think this card is just obviously miles better. So, to begin with, it's going to replace Recollect. But the second thing is that it's got chances in some kind of escape shift deck, I think.
Yeah? I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I don't know that it'll end up going that way, but it's possible that it's worth having one or two of these in some scenario because you're like, well, enough of the time I can just make a decent card of it because it gets back my tutor card or a land or a searcher, but then also it just gives me a way to do something really good for 5 or 7 or 9 mana when I'm flooding out. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's not good enough, but it's at least worth considering.
I was thinking it kind of on the notion of a restock. Restock was a really powerful card in some formats, right? This is can play restock, and
it's better than restock just at restock.
Yeah, so that's kind of the lens I was looking at this. It's getting 2 cards. If you repeal 2 cards off the top of your deck, you obviously don't want to pay 5 for that, right? 4 mana at instant speed, you already can probably do better than 4 mana at instant speed if you're just peeling 2 cards. But getting 2 cards from your graveyard, you get to pick which ones they are, I think that's a powerful ability.
Yep. I think so too.
That's the thing. And I think that if I think that Wildest Dreams has probably got some legs. And, the reasons for it are A, the 5 casting cost version is pretty compelling sometimes, and B, it only requires a single green. And that opens up some doors because basically any deck can get a single green if they want to, right? This is Modern we're talking about. And so if you have a deck that's 98% of the way there, but if only it had this minor recursion thing, it would be there. This is a cheap way to get there, I think.
Seems reasonable, at least worth a try. What do you think of Morbid Curiosity? 1 black sorcery is an additional cost to cast Morbid Curiosity, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Draw cards equal to the converted mana cost of the sacrificed permanent.
That seems pretty fancy to me for Modern.
So if you sacrifice Gurmag Angler, you draw 7 cards.
Yeah, but then I don't have a Gurmag Angler anymore. And
you do have 7 cards, though.
Yeah, but the Gurmag Angler wasn't trivial to get into play. I had to work to get the Gurmag Angler, and maybe I just want to kill somebody. But you're right.
Yeah, there's some delve cards. There's a variety of ways to cheat it. I mean, if you get the Colossus in play, right?
Yeah,
Metalwork Colossus.
But then I don't have the Metalwork Colossus.
Or right? You drew 11.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The reason that I don't like the Gurmag Angler and the Metalwork Colossus angles are, typically your deck has 60 cards, right? If you're going to play with a card like Metalwork Colossus or Gurmag Angler, you've optimized some substantial chunk of your deck into getting that into play.
Yep.
Right? So drawing 7 or 10 cards, but I don't have a way to win anymore, might not get you in. You might not be able to deploy the cards you just drew. And then second of all, like, how many cards deep am I that I got my huge thing into play? I don't know how many different, angles and outs I've got. So yes, it's super awesome and like, oh, I drew 7, I drew 10, whatever the number is, that's exciting. But like, if your entire deck is just fatty enablers in the fatty, like, okay, I drew more enablers, but like the whole goal is to take these like 6 of the 7 cards that I drew so I could get the Gurmag Angler back into play. And I might even draw a Gurmag Angler. That's why I think it's too fancy.
I think you're right. All right, here's one. Essence Extraction. 1 black, instant. Deal 3 damage to a creature and you gain 3 life.
Wow, am I not excited about this card.
Are you serious?
It costs 1 more than the one that I like.
Yeah, but the one that you like only does 2.
No. We're talking about Modern, right?
You're talking about Lightning Helix?
Yeah.
This is great. Do you know who appreciates Lightning Helix? Grixis.
I mean,
when was the
Lightning
last
Helix
time...
doesn't even get played in the main deck.
Lightning Helix isn't the colors of Grixis.
You think this card's great?
No.
This one's great.
I think this card is like fringe. But I think that this is a fringe role player that's worth considering because, like, when you're playing stuff like Jeskai, you do not appreciate life. You've got Lightning Helix and you don't even care.
Oh no, you don't even just play it half the time.
You play like 2 or you don't play any because you just don't appreciate what you have. Because also, incidentally, you can just play things like timely reinforcements or whatever. Grixis doesn't have nice things like that. You got to understand when you're playing Grixis.
Like, what is it, like Soren's Whisper or whatever?
Soren's Whisper?
What's the one that's like BB, deal 2 at instant speed, gain 2?
Essence Extraction gains 3. Not only does it gain 3, it does 3. So it could kill a wild Nakatl. It kills just so many more creatures that are the creatures that actually get played in decks where you'd want to gain life.
I am not on board for paying 3 mana for that.
You don't think that anybody's going to... You think Essence Extraction is going to fail the test. You don't think it's going to show up in the 75 of a top 8 SCG Open or bigger in the next year. I definitely think it will. There's not even a Modern Pro Tour.
I don't see it. I'll take the opposite side on this one.
All right.
It's just, in Modern, like... You can look at your life in a couple of different ways, right? One way you can look at your life is the way that Mike Dunne taught us, which is that life total exchanges can translate into card advantage if your opponent is playing with cards that just deal damage, right? So the exchange here is like a Gerard's Wisdom is worth, X amount of lightning bolts, right? That's one way of looking at it. But a different way of looking at it is the opportunity cost of the mana of the card itself. Like, sometimes you're actually going to gain more life on a relative basis by just casting a Dismember, taking the damage from paying the life from the Dismember, but 2 turns didn't go by. When the opponent would have inflicted more damage to you than you're going to get on the payoff here. That's the thing that I'm stuck on. And maybe you're right.
But I'm not saying this card's great. I think it's like barely fringe. I just think it'll show up.
Okay. I mean, I don't see it, but I've been wrong before.
Okay, here's a fancy one. You want fancy? Lost Legacy. 1 black sorcery. Name a non-artifact, non-land card. Search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles his or her library, then draw a card for each card exiled from hand this way. So it's sort of like our preview card from a few sets back, Infinite Obliteration.
It's like the other side of Infinite Obliteration, but wait, there's more.
The fact that you can target yourself is actually really cute. So the combo with Lost Legacy, there's a few ways you can do this. But you can Lost Legacy yourself and then exile all of your Relentless Rats. Or all of your Shadow Mage Apostles.
Oh, wow. You can draw a lot of cards that way.
Like, all the Relentless Rats that were in your hand are going to be cycled for 0 mana from your deck that now no longer has Relentless Rats in it. Now, the problem I've run into is that if you play enough land so that you can actually cast Lost Legacy on turn 3...
You've got nothing left.
Well, when you draw, like, even if your deck had, like say you only played with, like, 20 swamps or something, right? Even with just, like, 20 swamps, if you exile, like, 33 Relentless Rats or Shadow Apostles or whatever, right? Like, if you just exile 30, like, all these cards and then draw 7, even if you have, like, 2 copies of a combo card, first of all, what is your combo? Second of all, you might just draw 7 swamps.
Yeah, I think that might not be the way to go with Lost Legacy. Because the problem is, if you have you could do like a weird balance, right? Where, let's say you don't have like 40 Relentless Rats. Like, let's say you only have like, 10 or something like this. And maybe you fail to find some of them. I don't even know. The problem is ensuring that you get Lost Legacy in your hand at a relevant time. That's really the problem now. Because you can't play redundancies to set up Lost Legacy if you're devoting, like, most of your deck to these, like, apostles or whatever.
Yep. I think that one's probably not going to pan out, but it is fun to think about.
I mean, it's interesting. It's still maybe a playable card, right? Just on the opposite side of the Infinite Obliteration angle.
So just using it right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of feel like instead of letting somebody draw a bunch of cards, I might just pay the full price for a Memoricide, but maybe not. Like, that card has seen reasonable play. Either Memoricide or Cranial Extraction seen reasonable play in these kind of formats before. No biggie.
So here's one for you. Ceremonious Rejection. Blue instant counter target colorless spell.
This is an interesting card. I think that it will see modern play. It's good.
I do too.
It's good in so many. I mean, I think it probably will mostly be a sideboard card.
Yep, me too.
But like, for 1 mana, counter your, like, Thought-Knot
Cranial
Seer.
Plating.
We could name awesome colorless cards all day.
Well, the key is that it's like an annul, except instead of countering enchantments, it counters Eldrazi. For the most part. There's a few weird exceptions. But mostly, with Ceremonious Rejection, you get to counter Eldrazi and artifacts. But Eldrazi and artifacts are both great right now.
Well, and for one, I mean, you're gonna counter like the 5 casting cost haste guy, right? Or like a card that's just gonna kill you off the top. And I
think such a great answer to such a great weapon for helping smooth out Eldrazi and Affinity. And it has lots of other applications. Like, it's great against Lantern. Like weird stuff. There's all kinds of
awesome there. But you know where else? I think that this is obviously not like this isn't the regular label on the bottle way of using this, but what if you just counter like Mutagenic Growth or Gitaxian Probe?
Gitaxian Probe and Mutagenic Growth have color.
Oh, okay, they're colorful.
Yep.
All right, so you can't.
Oh. But no, you can't even counter like a Gearhulk.
You could, however, counter like a Kozilek's Return.
You can counter Kozilek's Return. So that is true.
How about
or Ugin the Spirit Dragon?
Or
Karn.
Karn, I think, is a big one. But what if you're countering like? Actually, when you're playing against Karn, that deck has a fair amount of artifacts too. So,
it's great against Tron deck where you're countering like their map or whatever.
But what if you're countering, like, if you're playing, like, Merfolk, for example, Kozilek's Return is, like, one of the few ways that a red deck can remove your Master of Waves successfully. So I think just, like, wanting to counter that might be good.
It's interesting. All right, here's another one that we haven't touched on that it seems like it's just a travesty to miss. Toolcraft Exemplar. White. We talked about this guy last week for Standard, but This is white for a 1/1 Dwarf Artificer. At the beginning of combat in your turn, if you control an artifact, Toolcraft Exemplar gets +2/+1 until end of turn, and if you control 3 or more artifacts, it also gains first strike until end of turn. So, what do you think about this guy in Modern?
I mean, you already declared him better than Wild Nikata last week, so...
Not in Modern. Although it might be. Probably
It might be. I think this guy requires, like, no help.
No.
Or, like, very little help.
Oh, yeah.
And what if you draw more than one copy?
Like, how is this not going to just be like, just picture, like, Craig Wescoe, right? You're just playing a deck that just has, like, 4 Aether Vials, and then you just have, like, some Aethersworn Canonists, or maybe some sort of, like, you have, like, Blink Moth Nexus, maybe, or maybe Sword of Fire and Ice, or... there's a variety of things. Not Sword of Fire and Ice. Sort of like any of the swords, really.
Why couldn't it be Sword of Fire and Ice? I think that's
it could. I mean, whichever one he wants to use. The point being that if you just use a little bit of equipment, or you already want to play Aether Vials in these sorts of decks.
It could be adventuring gear, right? Right.
Yeah, I mean, it could be It could also be Thraben Inspector.
I think Thraben Inspector is a high likelihood of those guys.
Smuggler's Copter is an easy 4 of. Like, just play 4 Smuggler's Copters in a deck like this. Why not? This card seems
obviously going to see play in Modern.
It seems great.
Do you remember when Whiteweed was actually one of the best decks in, I guess it was Extended, not Modern. But I just look at a lot of these cards and I'm like, why isn't this like a deck that people play? Like,
yeah.
They have a Force Spike that nobody plays, right?
Yeah. Card's okay.
I mean, I think you just got to find your spot.
I'm just saying that a 3/2 for 1 that asks almost nothing of you.
Almost nothing.
Almost nothing. That is like... Because I kind of don't think... Like, maybe it ends up just being good enough for some sort of a weird, like, Tempered Steel affinity deck. But I don't think you have to, like, play this guy in, like, some sort of an all-in deck. You know, like, a lot of affinity decks really value flyers and really value not playing with colored spells.
I mean, you're probably not going to go deep enough to get, like, Dark Steel Citadel, right? But maybe.
You could. If you're playing White Weenie instead of, like, 2-color, you might. I don't know.
I think Blink Moth Nexus is, like, a super cheap wave, though. That seems...
Yeah, this whole thing, it just seems really... And then it also, it's not... You know, it's not nothing that there's Inventor's Apprentice, which is red for a 1/2, and if you have any artifacts, he just has +1/+1.
The artifact bird ape.
Yeah, so she also is first of all, she's an easy 1-mana 2/3, and a 2/3 is like, I mean, red is very much often in the market for 1-drops with 2 power, but. She and the Toolcraft Exemplar are both artificers. That's kind of interesting, right? Like, there's the relic weapon. I mean, sorry, the equipment that's 1 mana that gives your creature +1/+2, and it equips to artificers for free. And if they ever unban Stoneforge Mystic, just crossing our fingers.
Yeah, there's just a little chance of them unbanning Stoneforge Mystic unless something very strange happens in Magic.
I don't know. I'm not convinced that that'd be that bad.
Really?
That's for another episode. I'm not sure that it would be that bad for the format. It might actually be good, but that's a crazy theory of mine.
I mean, I will think about this, but Stoneforge Mystic is like, it's not that it's the most powerful, like, because there are other powerful things you can do, but it's selection and it only costs 2. Like,
yeah,
that's like a demonic tutor with a body that's also a series of Black Lotuses, right? Like, it's not one Black Lotus; it's as many Black Lotuses as you want to use,
potentially,
right? I mean, you just have to spend it on particular kinds of cards. But luckily, you have cards like Batterskull that are good enough that just a random control deck will play them as their finisher. So when you start thinking about it like that, I'm like a blue-red control deck will just have, or a blue-black control deck will just have Batterskull. Like, they'll have 2 copies main deck or 2 copies sideboard, and that's just how they win. Like, don't you think that there's like a little bit of a disconnect if those are viable decks and you want to unban Stoneforge Mystic.
We'll see. What do you think of Blossoming Defense? Green, instant, target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof until end of turn.
I think that it's likely to see play as like a 2 of an infect. It's got a lot of Vines of the Vastwood to it, but it's better than Vines of the Vastwood sometimes.
I like that you can Blossoming Defense to protect your infect creature, even if your opponent has a Spellskite in play. Like a lot of spells that you might want to use to protect your elf or whatever your infect creature is, your opponent could just go pay 2 life and redirect it to Spellskite.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that one.
Yeah, Blossoming Defense can only target your own creatures, so your opponent can't steal it with their Spellskite. It's kind of nice, right? And it's super cheap, and it's efficient, and it's what you want, and it's so versatile.
Oh, I think this is like definitely going to be like, I don't know. It's going to be the winner's circle, not just in the top 8s of modern decks.
Oh yeah, it'll win. And I mean, maybe you play 2, maybe you play 4. I don't know.
I think 4 seems a little aggressive. At least
we'll see. If Tom Ross plays 4, then we play 4. I think that's it. I think that really the world is waiting to see what Tom Ross says.
I mean, I remember the first time that Tom Ross played with Become Immense in either Legacy or Modern, and people like scoffing at this, like, "Oh, this is ridiculous."
Modern,
now,
I mean, yeah,
the now Pantheon, everyone Become Immenses wherever they can.
Yeah, the Pantheon was just going nuts with Become Immense after Tom Ross signed everybody up. Here's another 1-mana trick. Not really a trick, but a 1-mana spell. Fragmentize. White sorcery. Destroy target artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 4 or less.
I mean, that's just like... It's just like what the Doctor ordered for some decks, right? I'm thinking that this card is... It's the wrong format to have it in Modern, but maybe if people are going to play Mono White Soul Sisters, they're going to maybe want an effect like this depending on the format, but it doesn't actually get them out of problems like Platinum Imperium, right?
Yeah, it doesn't get them out of Platinum Imperium, but it does give you an extremely cheap, efficient answer to a variety of problems that you might have. You know, like the fact that it hits stuff like Worship, in addition to just being a great anti-affinity card. Like this, I mean, this is just great against affinity, right? Like this is, I mean, I don't know where you want to use it, but you might also benefit from it being a sorcery. For instance, if you're playing some sort of a legacy deck with like Burning Wish or whatever. I mean, Burning Wish for Fragmentize is sweet.
So, I'm just thinking that like outside of Soul Sisters, like not knowing like all the potential decks, maybe like I don't know if you ever seen like the Mono Enchantment deck from Modern. It's just like nothing but Ghostly Prisons and Endless Horizons. This deck, I think like that deck maybe might want something like this, but most of the decks that want to have this kind of an effect can just play a Sacred Foundry and then cast Wear Tear. That's the reason why I'm like a little lukewarm on it. But obviously,
yeah, I think you're right.
1 mana for this effect is good for a lot of decks.
Somebody's going to want it somewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just probably not going to be the most common way to do it. What do you think of Glint Nest Crane? Does this guy have chances for Modern?
I want to say yes. This guy's too good.
I want to. God, I don't know if he really does, but he's got chances. I don't know if he'll get there, but I would love to see him do it.
The problem is he's kind of the wrong size for Modern.
Yeah.
Like he's too small to fight off Nacatls, you know.
Or Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, he's just not the right size. But I feel like if there's a deck that just wants... I don't know, are there decks that just like want to grind value against each other after sideboarding? This is kind of a low-power sideboard card for Modern, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think like for Standard, it would be amazing in a lot of matchups, but like opponents just dropping 3/3s or 3/2s for 1 makes me think that 2 mana for 3 toughness is... You better get 1 heck of an artifact. That's the only way he's going to be super viable.
All right. What do you think about Built to Smash? Red instant. Target attacking creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If it's an artifact creature, it gains trample until end of turn.
I think that this card is going to be successful in Modern, and I'm not even sure that it's going to be largely cast on artifacts. I think that just like red offensive giant growth is probably going to be good.
It's interesting the way that it can work with double strike. It could work with some sort of a weird infect strategy. It could work as part of some sort of a like what's the 1/2 that everybody loves where you play every time you play a sorcery or instant it gets +3/+0.
Kiln Fiend.
Yes, built to smash with some sort of a weird Kiln Fiend deck that you know that tries to give it double strike with assault. You know.
I like it because it's pretty analogous to Brute Force, which has already been successful in these kind of formats.
That's good at protecting your guy from Lightning Bolt, though.
Yeah, it's not good at that at all, but like I think that the reason that Brute Force was playable was because some decks have natural double strikers, right? Like it's not even necessarily about giving somebody double strike. You can just have cards like Boros Swiftblade, is that the name of him? Or Fencing Ace in your deck. Mm-hmm. And you just have a bunch of pump spells, and they're just start out good this way. And you're like, well, this card's kind of bad. It is kind of bad. But like a Fencing Ace still basically hits for 2 mana, which is like not that horrible. But his upside in a deck that's designed around him is probably pretty good.
That's fair.
His max ceiling, like Raphael Levy won a bunch of extended tournaments with Boros Swiftblade. Sorry.
So, what do you think about the Aetherworks Marvel? 4 mana legendary artifact. We talked about this a bit in a previous show, but for the purposes of Modern, I mean, legendary artifact. Whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get energy, and you can tap it and pay 6 energy. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You can cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost, but the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
So, didn't we talk about this potentially being a payoff for Saheeli Rai?
I don't know. You could, but I don't think you'd really do that because I think that, and maybe you would if you were playing Aetherworks Marvel for other reasons. But like, you can just play Aetherworks Marvel in a deck that just gets some energy. Like, if you just want to play with some energy cards, you could just Aetherworks Marvel, and
it's a 1-card combo.
And well, you had to get the energy. But, like, it's possible that Aetherworks Marvel is a card that you might actually just use without just being a win-the-game win-the-game combo. You might just be like, well, sometimes I just love having, 0-mana temporal apertures, but it's your choice of the top 6, right? And then if you happen to have, like, for instance, if you have Dynavolt Tower, every instant or sorcery spell you cast gives you 2 energy. And you could pay 5 energy and tap it to deal 3 damage to a creature or player. But the big thing on Dynavolt Tower is that you'll just once you have a Dynavolt Tower in Modern, you just can get as much energy as you want. Right, like it doesn't take very long because if you're just casting Serum Visions and Lightning Bolts and stuff,
they feed into the next one.
And then if you Aetherworks Marvel, I mean it's a tome that instead of paying 4 mana, gets you your choice of amazing cards, and then you also don't have to pay mana. I don't know. It might be just too much work for not enough payoff.
I think it seems like a lot of work for Modern. The only reason I say that is because these abilities are pretty cool, but if the opportunity cost of playing Aetherworks Marvel is that I'm not just tapping R3 to get an 8/8 can't kill me, that seems like a big trade-off to me.
All right.
Well, that's where the bar is set.
You want easy? Unlicensed Disintegration. 1 black, red. Destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, Unlicensed Disintegration deals 3 damage to that creature's controller.
I mean, this is like what every boy wants in their Christmas stocking, right?
And I have to imagine at least a fair number of women, particularly those that love ruthlessly destroying people, both their creatures and their life totals.
Also want this in their Christmas stocking, or maybe their other non-denominational holiday stocking.
Unlicensed Disintegration it's like 3 damage is just enormous. Like the difference between this and like, I mean, compare this to Murder, and it's not like anybody's playing Murder. I mean, Terminate's also legal, but like compared to Murder, this is 3 extra damage. So it's like the difference between Blightning versus Mind Rot. So like if you just are in the market for some removal spells in your like for instance, look at a burn deck. Like it's very common for a burn deck to be interested in things like Destructive Revelry, ways to smash to smithereens, ways to solve your problems, and also do damage to the face so that you're not taking a card off from damaging the face.
Yeah, because the problem with those decks is they often don't have any real card advantage. So every time they draw like a Pithing Needle or something to stop somebody's defensive card, then that's just 2 damage or 3 damage they didn't do.
And if you're playing some sort of a Shrapnel Blast burn deck, you could easily have enough artifacts between like, Darksteel Citadel, maybe Blinkmoth Nexus, maybe some kind of like Chromatic Sphere type deal, Chromatic Star, like you could, it's not that hard at all to imagine a burn deck actually just being able to do this. It's not going to be that common, but it's at least a playable option.
I think this card's going to be whiz-bang popular in Standard. As much as I like it, I don't think it's going to be a big Modern play.
I think it'll show up. I don't think it'll be big, but I think it'll show up.
Yeah, I think just destroying a creature is, I guess it's a big level of flexibility. Like, if you had, like, a black-red burn deck, for sake of argument, and this might be a card you played instead of Terminate, because Terminate doesn't do any damage, like you said before, but you want to have an ability to just remove a card like Platinum Empyrean. This card checks a lot of boxes.
So I don't know what the combo is, but what about Panharmonicon?
I don't know Panharmonicon.
This is the 4 colorless for artifact. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time.
So it's like a Rings of Brighthearth?
Doesn't cost any mana, which is like night and day for this kind of stuff,
Yeah, I also don't know that. Well, it costs 4. That's the problem, right? It's kind of unnatural to have a card like this be that level of expensive, because in the decks that are successful when they play these kinds of cards, like they tend to be able to like play their big spell and then get the payoff like all in one move. And this seems to me kind of more like I'm going to play my Panharmonicon, and then next turn I'm going to cast Uktabi Orangutan or whatever and kill 2 artifacts with it. That's how this works, right?
Well, it could, but isn't the big thing that you're trying to like find some sort of a recursive loop where you're just going to kill them as soon as you play, as soon as you like trigger anything?
Like you think like a Cloudstone Curio type thing?
Like, for instance, if you had a card that what's a good example? If you had a creature like, for instance, Wispweaver Angel, and this one's way too expensive, but Wispweaver Angel's ability would trigger twice, and then you just start blinking stuff. Now you need to have a different creature, so maybe that's not really doing it. I don't know what the right combo is. That's part of what I was trying to figure out. Is like,
well, what if you have something like Decoction Module, right? Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get an energy. So, like, if you had like 1 Decoction Module, you would get 2 energy. Is that correct?
Like, yeah, everything that's triggering, you're going to get the second copy of, but.
So if you have a Decoction Module if you have 2 Decoction Modules when you have a Panharmonicon in play, you can cast a Whirler Virtuoso and kill your opponent in 1 turn, right?
Well, they'll make infinite tokens anyway.
Yeah, like that's basically the thing that you can do there. It's probably, let me think, if you got now most of those things require like another card, so like it's not that difficult to imagine, like something around Brood Monitor or something. But Whirler Virtuoso I mean, we're already talking about having like 3 different artifacts in play before you cast the Whirler Virtuoso. But that is a thing you could do.
Yeah, we'll see. There might be something. I'm sure there's some kind of a cool thing you can do.
Yeah, but the bar, I think, is still the one you said earlier. I'm just super enamored of getting Platinum Empyreans in play for 4, and I'm actually really now, like, gears in my brain are turning, like, how can we break this in a meaningful way for, upcoming Modern Tournament?
So, do you think there's any chance at all of Gear Seeker Serpent? Gear Seeker Serpent is it's 5 blue for a 5/6, and it has affinity for artifacts. And then it has 5 and a blue. It can't be blocked this turn.
So this card has like a bunch of things wrong with it. Number 1, it has 2 blue in the upper right corner. Right? Like, that's a prohibitive amount of blue. If you're going to have a deck that can actually tap for 2 blue and wants a big creature, can probably do better than Gear Seeker Serpent.
I'm just saying that, like, a Mirror Enforcer has been playable. And this is a Mirror Enforcer that's a 5/6 instead of a 4/4.
Yeah, but Mirror Enforcer costs 0 mana. Gear Seeker Serpent costs 2 mana.
Sometimes.
But I think that the reason that Mirror Enforcer doesn't get played that often is because it costs 1 or more mana 1 too many times. Like, if it's always 0, then people are down for it. But if it's costing 1 and 2 mana, they're just not interested in that size of a creature in that strategy. Like, I think Gear Seeker Serpent, like, I don't know. I hesitate to say an artifact-heavy control deck because I feel like they would rather just have more value plays.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like, the unblockable ability is so expensive.
You got to admit, though, 5/6 is kind of a sweet set of stats.
I mean, it's like a Modi. Like, I love a Modi.
I'm just saying out classes, Siege Rhino and Tassiger and Gurmag Angler. All right, what do you think about Dramatic Reversal? 1 and a blue, instant. Untap all non-land permanents you control.
I think that I have not put enough thought into figuring out how to bust it, so maybe it's not bustable.
So here's a baseline. Here's just at the very, very least. If you Dramatic Reversal in your Isochron Scepter deck, you can just do 1 and a blue, instant, untap all non-land permanents you control. So if you just have
Scepter.
Right, so if you just put Isochron Scepter down with Dramatic Reversal, and as long as you have at least 3 mana in artifacts that are not lands, artifacts, like for instance, if you had like a Thran Dynamo type of card, anything that just taps for 3, like an Endless Lotus, for instance. If you had an Endless Lotus, if you just have a few different border post Mindstone types.
Well, if all you had
Signets.
was just Gilded Lotus, right, and the Isochron Scepter that had this card imprinted, couldn't you just tap the Lotus for 3, tap the Isochron Scepter to play the ability, then untap those 2 permanents, and then net 1 per cycle?
Yep.
So I guess it's a relatively easy way for infinite mana.
Right. There isn't like, and who knows? Maybe there's some kind of a weird deck that just values it in like an old school Tolarian Academy style approach. I would guess this one's not good enough, but it is possible. Just that you like Isochron Scepter with it is like that is a loop that is possible. So
lots of cool ideas this week. I think that the stuff that we talked about up front, a lot of those red cards, Madcap Experiment, and Chandra meeting her mom again. Like, I think these are both going to be like really substantial impacts very, very soon in Modern, and that the new Chandra and Saheeli Rai are both going to be Planeswalkers.
Toolcraft Exemplar, maybe.
Toolcraft Exemplar, I think, is also going to be exciting. But I think all those red cards and maybe red-blue cards are I think these are going to early days. If the Pro Tour was going to be a modern Pro Tour, which I guess they don't do that very much anymore, might see some of this stuff hitting.
And we haven't even talked about how good the new lands that come into play untapped are. They're just untapped if you have 2 or fewer lands.
Yep. So there's
anyway tons of amazing stuff.
So
I'm excited to dive in.
We're all gonna be brewing and playing and meeting each other on the internet. So we're Top of a Podcast in lots of places: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Patreon. So if you want to check us out anywhere, any of those places, we're Top of a Podcast everywhere. And just a shout out to Morgan Lewis on Patreon.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thanks, Morgan. That was lots of modern from Kaladesh.